In the autumn of 1891, a boy walked out of the woods in Boggs Hollow, West Virginia, wearing nothing but a torn linen shirt stained with something the local doctor could not identify. He was barefoot. His hair had been cut in uneven patches, close to the scalp in some places, untouched in others. And when a farmer named Elias Renfro found him standing at the edge of a cornfield at first light, the boy did not run. He did not cry. He simply looked up and asked what day it was. He said his name was Samuel. He said he was 9 years old. He said he had been gone for a long time, but he could not say how long. And when the sheriff arrived that afternoon and asked him where he had come from, the boy pointed back toward the tree line and said something that made 3 grown men step away from him. He said the others had taken his voice. He said they had put something under his tongue and told him it would grow. He said if he spoke about them, it would climb up into his throat and it would open his mouth from the inside. The sheriff wrote all of this down. The county doctor examined the boy that evening and found a small incision, healed but recent, beneath his tongue. And when they asked him who the others were, the boy would not answer. He only shook his head and pointed back at the woods. This is the story of what was found in Boggs Hollow, what the boy eventually told a Methodist minister 3 weeks later, and why the case file, which was sealed by the county in 1893, was never opened again until a genealogist stumbled across it in a courthouse basement in 1978. Before we go any further into what Samuel said, do me a favor. If you like stories that were buried on purpose, stories where the official record ends but the real story keeps going, subscribe to this channel. We cover cases that were meant to be forgotten. That is the whole point of what we do here. Hit subscribe, and let's keep going. Boggs Hollow was not a town. It was not even a settlement. It was a name given to a stretch of low, wooded land in Randolph County, West Virginia, roughly 7 miles from the nearest post office. In 1891, it was inhabited by fewer than 40 people, most of them related to one another, most of them living in cabins built by their grandfathers. The land itself was poor, the soil was rocky, the winters were long, and the people who lived there had a reputation, even among their own neighbors in the surrounding valleys, for keeping to themselves. The nearest church was a Methodist chapel 11 miles east. The nearest schoolhouse had closed 6 years earlier when the teacher, a young woman from Pennsylvania, left without giving notice and never returned. Her belongings were still in the cabin she had rented. Nobody in Boggs Hollow spoke about her again. Elias Renfro was not from the Hollow. He owned a farm at the mouth of it, where the road came in from the county seat. His family had been there for 2 generations. He was 44 years old in the fall of 1891, married, with 4 children. And by every account, he was a serious man, not given to drink, not given to imagination, and not the kind of person who would invent what he found that morning. He said he heard a sound before he saw the boy. It was not crying, it was a low, steady humming, the kind a child makes when they are trying to keep themselves company. But Renfro said it was not a tune he recognized. It was not a hymn. It was not a lullaby. It went up and down in a pattern he could not follow, and it did not seem to have a beginning or an end. He said, years later, that he still sometimes heard it in his sleep. Renfro followed the sound to the edge of his cornfield, and there, standing between 2 rows of dead stalks, was Samuel. The boy did not look starved. That was the first thing Renfro noticed. Whatever had happened to him, he had been fed. His skin was pale but not sunken. His eyes were clear. But his fingernails had been cut down almost to the quick, evenly, on both hands. And the linen shirt he was wearing was not a shirt made for a child. It was cut down from something larger, something an adult would have worn, and stitched at the shoulders with a thread that Renfro did not recognize. Renfro took the boy back to his farmhouse. His wife, Mary, gave the boy bread and warm milk. The boy ate slowly, chewing each bite for a long time before swallowing. He did not speak while he ate. When Mary asked him his name, he waited until his mouth was empty. Then he said it. Samuel, just the one word. Mary later told her sister that when she reached out to touch the boy's shoulder, he flinched, not the way a frightened child flinches, but the way an animal does when it is not sure whether the hand coming toward it is going to feed it or hurt it. She said she did not touch him again that morning. She let him eat. She let him sit. By noon, Renfrew had ridden into the county seat and returned with the sheriff, a man named Wyatt Cole. Sheriff Cole was 38 years old. He had been sheriff of Randolph County for 6 years. He had handled murders, stabbings, a lynching he had failed to prevent, and a fire in 1888 that had killed a family of 5. He was not, by any reasonable measure, a man who was easily unsettled. His report from that afternoon, which survives in the Randolph County Archive, runs to 4 pages. Most of it is procedural. The location, the time, the name of the farmer, the physical condition of the boy. But there is a paragraph near the end that reads differently from the rest of it. The handwriting changes, the letters get smaller, and Cole writes, "The boy was asked to describe the persons who had held him. He would not. When pressed, he opened his mouth and showed me the underside of his tongue, where I observed a small, clean cut, approximately half an inch in length, which appeared to have been made with a sharp blade and to be several days healed. He then said, and I write this exactly as he spoke it, 'They put a seed in me. It will grow if I say their names.'" Cole closed the report there. He did not ask the boy any more questions that day. The county doctor, a man named Prescott, arrived that evening. He examined Samuel in the Renfrews' front room by lamplight. His medical report, which was filed separately, confirmed the incision. It also noted that the boy was underweight by perhaps 8 pounds, that his teeth were sound, that his eyes and ears responded normally, and that there were faint marks on both of his wrists that were consistent with having been bound, though not recently. The marks were healing. Prescott estimated they were 4 to 6 weeks old, which meant that wherever Samuel had been, he had been there for at least a month, and whoever had held him had, at some point, let him go. Samuel stayed with the Renfrew family for the next 3 weeks. This was not unusual for the time. There was no orphanage in the county. There was no state agency to take custody of a child found under circumstances no one could explain. The sheriff visited every few days. He asked gentle questions. He tried to establish where the boy had come from originally, whether he had parents, whether anyone was looking for him. Samuel gave answers, but the answers did not match up. He said his mother's name was Ruth. He said his father's name was John. He said they lived in a house with a red door. But when Cole asked him what town the house was in, Samuel would say a different name each time. Sometimes he said Elkins. Sometimes he said Beverly. Once he said a name that was not a town at all, but a word Cole did not recognize, and when Cole asked him to repeat it, the boy said he could not. Cole rode to Elkins. He rode to Beverly. He sent letters to the post offices in 3 surrounding counties. No family named Ruth and John, with a missing 9-year-old boy named Samuel, was reported anywhere. No red door was found. No school had a record of him. It was as if the boy had come from nowhere. And yet Samuel spoke. He read. Mary Renfrew discovered, in the 2nd week, that he could read from her Bible, slowly but accurately. He knew his letters. He knew basic arithmetic. He had been educated. Someone, at some point, had taught him. But when Mary asked him who had taught him, Samuel would only say, "The woman with the long hands." Not his mother. The woman with the long hands. Mary asked him what he meant by that. Samuel held up his own small hand and traced along his fingers, from the base to the tip, and said, "Longer than that, much longer." Mary did not sleep well that night. Before we move on to the minister's arrival, stop for a second. What you just heard about the woman with the long hands, the boy who came from nowhere, the family that could not be found, that is the part that changes everything. But it only makes sense when you see it written out next to the original 1,891 archive documents, the sheriff's paragraph, the doctor's exam. It is all in the document linked below. Take 5 seconds right now, grab it, and then come back, because what comes next builds directly on it. The link is in the description. The QR code is on your screen. 3 weeks after Samuel was found, a Methodist minister named Josiah Bell arrived at the Renfrew farm. He had been sent by the church in Beverly at Sheriff Cole's request. The idea was that a man of the cloth might be able to speak with the boy in a way that a sheriff could not, that the boy might confess, in the religious sense, what he had been unable to tell the law. Reverend Bell was 61 years old. He had been a minister for 34 years. He had heard, in that time, most of what people can tell another person. He had sat with dying men who had killed. He had sat with women who had done things to their own children that he never wrote down. He believed, by his own admission, that there was very little a human being could describe that he had not already heard some version of. He spoke with Samuel for 2 hours on the afternoon of November the 14th, 1891. He did so alone, in the front room of the Renfrew farmhouse, with the door closed. Mary Renfrew later said that she could hear only the low murmur of the minister's voice, and now and then the smaller, quieter voice of the boy. She said she heard no crying. She said she heard, at one point, a long silence that lasted perhaps 10 minutes, in which neither of them spoke at all, and then she heard the minister say, very softly, "Oh, dear God." He wrote a letter to Sheriff Cole that same evening. The letter was 3 pages long. It was found in the county archive with the sheriff's file, folded into thirds, and by all appearances it had not been read by anyone in 87 years when the genealogist opened it in 1978. Reverend Bell began his letter by apologizing. He said he was writing before his memory of the conversation could fade, and that he wanted to be as precise as possible about what the boy had said, because he did not fully understand it himself. He wrote that he had begun by asking Samuel simple questions about God, about prayer, about whether Samuel had ever been in a church. Samuel had answered all of these questions politely. He had said yes, he knew about God. He had said his mother had taught him to pray before the others took him. Bell had then asked, gently, who the others were. And Samuel had told him, according to the letter, Samuel said there were 4 of them. He said they lived in a house that was, and here Bell uses Samuel's exact words, under the ground, but not buried. Bell interpreted this to mean a cellar, or perhaps a partial dugout, of the kind still used by poorer families in the region. Samuel said there was a woman, whom he called the mother, though she was not his mother. There were 2 men, whom he called the uncles, though he did not think they were brothers. And there was a 4th person, whom Samuel would not describe, and whom he referred to only as the one who stays in the room. Bell asked what the 4 of them did, what they had done to him. Samuel was quiet for a long time. Bell wrote that he did not push, he waited, and eventually Samuel said that the mother had washed him every night, that the uncles had taught him things, that he had been given food and a place to sleep, that, in his own words, he had not been treated badly. Bell asked, "Then why did they cut you?" And Samuel said, "Because I was going to leave." He said that he had understood, at some point in the summer of 1891, that he was not going to be allowed to leave. He had understood that the others intended to keep him. He said that he had started, in secret, to plan how to run, and that the one who stays in the room had known. Samuel would not explain how. He only said that the one in the room always knew. The cut under his tongue, Samuel said, had been made the night before they let him go. He said the mother had done it while the uncles held him. He said she had put something in the cut, and she had told him that if he ever spoke the names of the 4 of them out loud, to anyone, what she had put in him would grow, and it would kill him. Bell asked him, quietly, "Why then did they let you go?" And Samuel said, "Because I was not the one they were waiting for." The letter ends there. Bell signed it, dated it, and sent it to Sheriff Cole by the morning coach. But there is a note at the bottom of the last page, added in different ink, in Bell's handwriting but noticeably shakier, that appears to have been written later, perhaps that night. It reads, "I have not recorded here everything the boy said. There are things he described about the 4th person, the one in the room, which I do not wish to commit to paper. I will speak of them to you in person if you require it. But I will say that if what he has told me is true, and I believe that it is, then there is something in those hills that is not a person and has not been a person for a very long time. God keep us." Sheriff Cole rode out to Boggs Hollow the following week, in late November, with 3 deputies. They spent 4 days searching the woods along the ridges above the hollow. They found nothing. No cabin under the ground. No cellar. No sign of the 4 people Samuel had described. They interviewed every family that lived in the hollow. Every family said they had not seen the boy before. Every family said they did not know what he was talking about. Cole wrote in a follow-up report that he considered the possibility that the boy was lying, that he had made up the entire account. But he wrote, and this is his exact phrasing, "The cut under his tongue is real. Someone made that cut. And whoever made it for a reason." Cole ended the report with a single sentence that stands alone on the page. He wrote, "I do not believe the boy invented the woman." Samuel remained with the Renfro family through the winter of 1891 and into the spring of 1892. Mary Renfro grew fond of him. She wrote in a letter to her sister, which also survives, that the boy was gentle, quiet, that he did his chores without being asked, that he learned quickly, and that he was, in most ways, an ordinary child. She wrote that he had bad dreams. She wrote that he would sometimes wake in the night and ask her, "Is she in the house?" She wrote that he never explained who he meant. In May of 1892, a distant cousin of the Renfros, a woman living in Ohio who had no children of her own, wrote and offered to take Samuel in. The Renfros, who by that point had 5 of their own children and a farm that was not doing well, agreed. Samuel was put on a train in June. Mary Renfro said goodbye to him at the station. He hugged her. He said thank you. He got on the train. He arrived in Ohio. The cousin, whose name was Hannah Morrow, wrote back to Mary Renfro in July to say that Samuel was settling in well. She wrote again in September to say that he had started school. She wrote a third time in November to say that he was healthy and happy. In February of 1893, Hannah Morrow wrote one final letter. It was brief. It said that Samuel had died in his sleep on the night of the 21st. The doctor could find no cause. He had gone to bed the night before, complaining of nothing. He had not woken up. Hannah Morrow buried him in a small cemetery outside her town. She marked the grave only with his first name, because she did not know his last one. She never had children of her own. She never wrote to the Renfros again. Sheriff Cole closed the case file in the spring of 1893, shortly after receiving word of the boy's death. He filed the report, the doctor's exam, the minister's letter, and his own follow-up notes together, and marked the file with a red tag that indicated it was not to be reopened without the sheriff's personal authorization. This was not standard procedure. It is not clear why Cole did it. He remained sheriff for another 11 years. He never spoke publicly about the case. He died in 1917. The file sat in the courthouse basement for 85 years. In 1978, a genealogist named Ellen Chastain, who was researching a family unrelated to any of this, pulled it by mistake. She read it. She then requested permission from the county clerk to make copies of the documents, which was granted, and she wrote a short article about the case for a regional historical journal. The article was published in 1980. It attracted almost no attention. But in 1994, a researcher at West Virginia University, using ground-penetrating radar in an unrelated archaeological survey of Randolph County, identified what appeared to be a small subterranean structure on a ridge above the former site of Boggs Hollow. The hollow itself had been abandoned since the 1930s. The trees had grown back over it. The structure was, according to the survey, roughly 10 feet by 12 feet, with a low ceiling, and appeared to have been dug into the side of the ridge and roofed with timber and earth. It was not a natural formation. It was, in the researcher's own words, a room. The site was not excavated. There was no funding, no jurisdiction, no clear purpose. The report was filed. The site was marked on a map. And to this day, no one has ever gone inside. The researcher who found it, whose name was Dr. Aaron Miles, retired from the university in 2003. In a short interview he gave to a local newspaper the year before his retirement, he was asked about the Boggs Hollow structure. He said only that it was, in his professional opinion, human-made, that it appeared to have been in use for a long period of time before it was abandoned, and that it was not a root cellar or a mine shaft or any other structure that fit the ordinary pattern of that region. When the reporter asked him what he thought it was, Miles said he did not know. And then he said, and this is quoted directly in the newspaper, "Some things are buried because burying them is the correct thing to do. I would not open it." He did not explain what he meant. He passed away in 2009. His notes on the survey were never located after his passing. His office had been cleared out within a week. Samuel is buried in a cemetery in Ohio under a stone that says only his first name and no dates. Nobody ever visits it. The cemetery itself is now bordered on one side by a strip mall and on the other side by a highway. The 4 people he described have never been identified. The room in the ridge above Boggs Hollow has never been opened. And what he said the woman put under his tongue, whatever it was, has never been explained. Sheriff Cole believed the boy. Reverend Bell believed him too. Mary Renfro, who spent every day for 8 months in the same house with Samuel, who fed him and washed his clothes and read to him at night, believed him without reservation until the day she died in 1931. She kept his last drawing, a small pencil sketch of a house with a red door, folded in her Bible, until it was buried with her. Whatever was in those hills in the summer of 1891, if it was ever there, was there long before Samuel arrived, and it may still be there now.